Hi everyone, before you dive into the episode, I just wanted to interrupt really quickly. You're gonna dive into this episode and you're gonna hear me call this podcast the Holistic Hustle Podcast. And that is because it used to be the old name of this podcast. And it was an amazing ride. I'm so grateful for the Holistic Hustle Podcast and what it served. But recently I've decided to rebrand the podcast based off the evolution of my own journey, my own story, and where God is calling me to go next. And so now the rebrand, which you may know already, is called Wisdom is Wealth. Didn't want you to be confused, so dive into this episode. They were an amazing episode, amazing guests, amazing insights, and enjoy.
Anyone that struggles with or experiences anxiety will often say, I have anxiety, right? And I think it becomes too much a part of their identity, and then they see themselves as an anxious person.
Hi, I'm Justin Blanamo, and this is Holistic Hustle. Holistic Hustle is doing things for the right reasons, working hard for the right reasons. The healthy balance of what work and progression and accomplishment and success should actually look like. Welcome back to another episode of the Holistic Hustle Podcast. I've got a very special friend of mine with me today, Nadia Fiorita, who is a licensed clinical therapist and a certified mental wellness coach. She has been in the field for about 14 years and currently has a virtual practice based out of South Florida. She specializes in helping ambitious women overcome high functioning anxiety and live a more balanced, intentional life. She lives in Miami with her husband and 3 stepchildren and loves to travel and stay active. I'm going to give a little bio of Nadia myself. And after I just read that awesome one, but like Nadia and I have, been friends for about 3 years now. Started off as her being a client of my company, JFF, which we talk about from time to time here on this podcast. But it just, as I spent more time with her and the programs that we had and the interactions that we had, she's very talented at what she does, but the thing that stood out the most was just what an incredible human she was. We share a lot of, passions, particularly, our passion for God. And I think that's when our conversations and friendships started to take a jump to the next level. And then just to see her practice take off and her expertise being able to be used to change people's lives over the past couple of years has been an incredible privilege of mine. And it all started with Nadia, just when she came to us a couple of years ago, she was about her business. Not like, yes, her actual business, but like if she sets out to do something, like she's going to do it. And we saw that as a client of ours, but then now to see it and have that displayed in her business when it comes to her clients and the mission and word that she is spreading out in this space has just been absolutely incredible. So it was an easy decision to get Nadia on the podcast here today. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited and honored to be a guest.
Of course. And I think you're a great fit for many reasons. I would say the majority of people listening to this have struggled with anxiety, probably need a therapist, if not 3 like me, and it just shows up in so many different ways. And, over the past 5 to 10 years, as you probably know, anxiety has just become more and more prevalent, especially in like the high performance culture, right? The high achieving culture, which that's a lot of people that are listening to this message. And even myself, like over the past couple of years, I've had to admit, like maybe this feeling that I'm having is anxiety, right? Maybe I should learn more about it. And honestly, your content has helped me a ton, but I'd be curious, like, when was it that you decided to specifically just help people with their anxiety, and what fueled that decision?
That's a great question. I think it all goes back to, and I think a lot of clinicians and therapists would probably say this, is their own internal experiences, their own personal experiences. Grew up in an Italian family, but it wasn't the most healthy. It was, somewhat chaotic and dysfunctional, and the specifics don't really matter. What matters is the awareness that I started to have into my own self and the curiosity that I started to have about, what drives me as a person, what motivates my choices and behaviors, and what is the environment around me, whether that's my family, the school that I go to, the community that I live in, impact me as a human. And there were particular experiences that I had gone through that I wish I had the proper, I think, knowledge, understanding, education, and support that as I got older, I wanted to be able to create that space for not just women, but for families. So in my earlier career, I got my graduate degree in social work after getting a undergrad degree in business, which is really funny. I then like pivoted very quickly because I just started diving into like my own therapy and reading a ton outside of like my education. Um, and I really just wanted to provide a space and education and knowledge and understanding to others that I didn't necessarily have, at certain times in my life. So,
Love that, because I think a lot of times, like the experiences or traumas, particularly that we have as kids, we either run from them the rest of our life or we make it our life's mission to help people have what you didn't have when you were going through that. And I can relate to that a ton because that's a lot of where JFF came from. Seeing my parents file for bankruptcies and the struggles that we had because of that. It was just like, as a promise, as a little boy, I was like, I'm never going to worry about money when I can control it one day. And then as I grew up, it kind of turned into like, how can I help other people do the same thing? And that's kind of what I'm hearing with your story. Maybe selfishly here. I don't know if that's the best term, but like, what would you say growing up in an unhealthy Italian family did to you? Like, your family hopefully won't hear this. Like, and if not, like, I'm sure they'll understand because I joke with my family all the time. Like, I'm so messed up because of you all crazy Italians. And not to interject here while I just asked you a question, but joking with my family as well. Like I was the last male to have the Italian last name Buonamo. And so if I didn't reproduce 100% Italian, the name was over. And I kept joking with my mom and my sister. I'm like, you think I'm going to sign up to marry one of you? I love you, but I will not be signing up for that. So when I ask this question, if any family members are listening, all joking here, but I just would be curious what your perspective is on that.
So one of the things that I think stands out in Italian culture, and I don't think it only stands out in Italian cultures, I think many cultures, I think, sort of behave this way or act this way is just this whole idea around keeping it in the family and the secrets that we keep it with regards to what we're going through. And I think when you think about high achieving, ambitious individuals, high functioning anxiety, there's this idea of you can't really talk about it. You can't speak up about it. You can't ask anybody for help because that means you're being open and honest and vulnerable about it. So it like the fact that I was going to therapy in my early 20s on my own, it was, I'm sure I didn't ask people what they thought about it, but I'm sure they thought I was crazy. And they're like, what is Nadia doing? Like, and she's getting her master's degree in what? And she wants to do what? Like it really kind of goes against, I think, like, and maybe you can relate to that. I think when you talk about bankruptcy or foreclosure or any of these like, money traumas, financial traumas that we all have, right? Like you don't want to talk about it. You don't want people to know that you're going through it. Yeah. Yet it's that very thing, the ability to be honest with not only yourself, but somebody else, the ability to be vulnerable, the ability to, and the courageousness it takes to ask for help. Those are the very things that lead you to freedom, to healing, to community, to God, to whatever it is. Mm. And I think in particular in the high achieving world, you want to look a certain way, you want to appear a certain way. You don't really want people to know what's going on inside.
Answer, and I'm happy that I asked because it makes me feel better about a lot of things that like I've experienced or maybe continue to display because I feel you on that. Like I realized growing up that there were so many topics that were taboo to talk about, and if you did talk about them and it was outside of the family, that was even more taboo. Right. Like it was just looked at as wrong. And like vanity seems to be really important, meaning that like making sure that everything on the outside to the common viewer looks good, looks in place. There's nothing wrong, right? Which is just so unrealistic, right? We're going to go through problems, and being able to speak about those in a transparent and vulnerable way and seek the right help and opportunities to help you work through is like, it's key. It's key to living a healthy life. And I think the way you and I grew up, and maybe a lot of people listening to as well, like made us feel wrong for the things that are actually right, the things that are actually needed. And
Yeah.
so I appreciate that perspective a ton. And I think that there's even outside of like the Italian culture and the way we grew up, there's a lot of beliefs and talk and advice around anxiety these days. And so like, what is a common belief around anxiety, or maybe a popular remedy that you don't necessarily agree with?
Medication.
Yeah, get in that a little bit. I'm curious.
I'll probably get a lot of heat for this, but
You're good. You're safe.
no, I think that traditionally and conventionally in the mental health field, the go-to has been medication. And while I think that medication has a time and place, I've been on medication. There was one particular time in my life that medication was so helpful to me. But I think we're generally over medicated. And I think there's this idea that there's a quick fix or a quick relief that people can get. And I think when you talk about well-being, emotional well-being, mental well-being, spiritual well-being, it's a journey. It's a process. And while medication can maybe provide someone maybe a higher sense of motivation or some relief in their feelings of anxiousness or depression, you still have to do the work. And so I think the medication that has been prescribed so easily to not even just adults, to even children, like really young children, it scares me. And I think it reinforces this idea that there's a quick fix and there's a quick remedy to what might be for some people a more complex circumstance or situation, or maybe an unresolved trauma or something like that.
Mm-hmm. It's banded over the real problem.
Yeah. And
And
I think, you talk about holistic, in this podcast. For me, that's been a part of my journey. And I think the women that come to me, they don't necessarily want to be on medication. They don't want to go that route, or they've tried the medication and maybe it's helped a little bit, but they're still not really resolving what needs to be resolved, or asking the proper questions of what's the underlying root or cause as to why I'm feeling this. What have I been through, or what's going on in my life, or what set of beliefs do I hold that contribute to this ongoing sense of anxiousness, worry, stress, etc.
And you don't get real results and transformation until you address it at that level that you're talking about. And medication doesn't address that at that level. It masks the symptoms to make us at least functional, to make us, be able to take on the day, right? It's for the short term, but it becomes people's long-term solution, or they mistake it for an actual fix instead of banded over the real problem. And again, if people are listening to this, they're on medication, it's helpful. Great. We're not saying it can't be helpful, right? When we're talking about what will create true transformation and allow you to work through and move past your anxiety, it's getting to the core, right, of what's actually going on. I can attest to that a ton. And so what would be the biggest piece of advice you would give to anyone listening to this who has been struggling with anxiety for a while with very little relief or progress?
That's a good question. I think one of the most powerful things you can do is and I'm trying to figure out how to best say this, because I think it happens on a belief level. I think anyone that struggles with or experiences anxiety will often say, I have anxiety, right? And I think it becomes too much a part of their identity. And then they see themselves as an anxious person, or someone with anxiety, or someone suffering with anxiety. Anxiousness or anxiety is a normal, natural human emotion that you're going to feel at times. And sometimes it's really helpful. You want to feel anxious, right? If you're in a dangerous situation or there's a threat that you need to be able to take action from or escape from or run from, you want there to be anxiety. But it's become more about our self-image, and it can also be unhelpful in ways. And so I think like if you're able to reprogram how you see yourself on a fundamental like belief level and and take action to build a different set of beliefs that you have about yourself, if that makes sense, that is going to help create a sense of freedom and a sense of transformation, because you're ultimately changing the way that you see yourself.
I love it. That's actually extremely helpful for me. Like, don't let it be a part of your identity and how you see yourself, but instead just a normal symptom that pops up from time to time. And then when it starts to get past the healthy levels of being normal, then like there may be some help or some support that is needed to understand why it has risen to that higher level, right? But in the entire process, making sure like you're not identifying with it like, I'm a super anxious person. It's like, no, you're just, your anxiety levels just gotten a little bit higher lately, and let's figure out why.
Or the ways that you're coping with it are
Yeah,
not healthy, right?
yeah,
You get stuck in overthinking, or maybe you're reaching for that alcohol a little
yeah.
too frequently, or maybe you've stopped exercising. And, you know, the way that we cope with it tends to perpetuate it also,
Oof,
if that makes
I
sense.
agree. I agree. The majority of my anxiety lately is just based off of ways that I decide to cope with it either now or in the past, and they're just making me anxious thinking about it. I'm like, you idiot. Like, and so completely understand that because um anxiety to me is, I heard it described this way at some point. It's just a buffer for our ego to protect us for going underneath that anxiety, what's actually below it, what's actually causing it. And so like our ego doesn't want us to go there, because if we go there, we'll heal and we'll transform most likely, or we have a better chance of doing so. And so when the anxiety hits, it's kind of like a buffer where it like bounces you off. And that bounce is like, let me just go cope with it instead of sitting with it. Let me just go cope with it instead of getting underneath it. And so, as time goes on, I have found myself getting more and more convenient with the coping, right? It's a lot easier to take a shot of alcohol than it is to drive 15 minutes and work out for 60 minutes, right? And go to the
Or
gym.
pull out your journal and start to write about what's really going on for you in that
Oh, yeah,
moment.
a
Yeah.
1000%. It's way easier to pull up my phone and start scrolling, which I've been doing a ton more than facing the anxiety by journaling.
That's
And
right.
so, I just think it's just such an important topic, especially the day and age that we're in. And just having somebody like hold up a mirror for you that's like trustworthy, that knows this really well. And even the smartest people in the world, you need somebody to hold that mirror up for you, right? To ultimately just, hold a neutral setting, a non-judgmental, safe space, just to help you understand like, where's your anxiety really come from, right? And then after we've been with it enough, like, how can we actually work through that? And so, Nadia, I know like you're like the best in the world at that. And that's why I got 75 different waiting lists. Um, but I'm sure there's going to be a decent amount of interest for some next step and some further next steps and further connection here. So where can people find you? And there's any opportunities for people to work with you right now? And if not, like where can they sign up for a waiting list?
The best option right now is going to my website. So it's just nadiafiorita.com. And there's actually a contact form that you can submit. Right now I have like a couple spots open for this new service that I started to offer. It's the high functioning anxiety therapy
Great
intensive
service.
program. So it's a shorter term, more accelerated program for women that want, faster results. I'm not taking anyone for one-on-one therapy at the moment. But if you submit a contact form, then I could put you on the waiting list.
Awesome. And then, but that intensive though, that is one-on-one. It's just sped up.
It is one-on-one. Yes, I'm sorry. It's a
Perfect.
one-on-one. It's a multi-day program that I get to customize and personalize for each particular client, depending on how many sessions they want and what they want to focus on.
Didn't realize there was a couple of spots left. So hopefully there still are as people are hearing this. And if so, jump on that. Worst case scenario, just follow Nadia, be in her world, and I promise you, you won't regret it. So, Nadia, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Justin. It was a
Of
pleasure.
course. Of course, of course. And thank you everyone for listening to another episode of the Holistic Hustle podcast. As always, subscribe, download, and share this episode with somebody that you think it will benefit. I know I say this at the end of each episode, but I'm just simply trying to create content that's going to change the world. And I can't do it alone. I need y'all to share, especially if you thought of somebody as you were listening to this message. And so we appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next episode.